Man, if I could get Jim Carrey, I'd phone Jim and be like, Jim, I've got a number of questions. My first one is, can you get All American Rejects in Canada? Be like, really? That's your first question ever? Not like, how
That's
did the Grinch costume work? I'd be like, no, that was number two. Like, number two on my list
you're gonna
was like,
blow
how
your
much green fur did you have stuffed in your mouth while filming that? And he's like, tell me a little bit about how the All American Rejects formed, because I read that it started in high school around 99.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but like, tell me a little
back in
bit
the
about,
late 1900s.
yeah, as they say today. Oh, it's so hurtful.
Yeah,
I was born in 91 and I'm still there. Like, if I see one of you mention that to me, I will, yeah.
82, baby.
I feel like I should have had a 91 shirt on. No, but tell me a little bit more about like how it started and how the name came about, because Mike's response was like, oh yeah, we thought it was really cool. I'm like, shut the fuck up. I'm like, give me a better answer than that.
It's funny. I haven't told the where the name came from story for a very long time, but a friend asked me the other day, um, and I was like, you know what? I haven't told that story in a long time. I'll tell the real version, and I'll tell you the same. But yeah, we started in high school. I'd been playing in bands, ever since seventh grade. And kind of the first one that stuck was what became the All American Rejects. I was playing drums at the time. Tyson was our singer now was just playing bass, and we were the only ones who showed up to practice. Everybody else was too busy, I don't know, playing high school, whatever. So it was just the rhythm section, a very sad band practice, bass and drums only. Um, so it's like, hey man, like I play guitar too, and he's like he sings a little bit. So we just started writing these songs, and I had some recording equipment and a little Tascam 4-track tape recorder. And so we just started recording our songs, and those became the demo tapes, which got sent out, to various record companies unsolicited, and we just got lucky as far as that goes. But the name came about, yeah, I think 1999. This was before I had a home computer with the internet on it. So we would get in my 1987 Toyota Tercel hatchback, drive around Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is a very small town. You can drive around the whole town in like 10 minutes. Um, and each time we would pass the record store, we would go inside, and they had like this kiosk where you could type in like a band or a record and see if they had it in stock. So we would just type in band names, and if anything came up, it meant that it was taken and being used. So the first thing we came up with, there was a song we had at the time. There was a lyric like "All American" something with like kind of a negative connotation to it, like self-deprecating. And somebody, I think Tyson said, let's try rejects, and we typed it into the little kiosk computer, and huzzah, it was not taken. So that was it. It's kind of like getting a tattoo, um we came up with it a long time ago, and we
Yeah.
said yes, that's what we want. And then here we are 25 years later, and it's part of us, but we're kind of stuck with it at the same time.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
interesting because like your story on that is kind of like I understand where you're coming from, but like today's world, and I'm sure there are bands out there that do it, but it's like now they can just go on to like random generator and then it's just like let's put in some
Totally.
words that we like and let's see, and then it's like crash test dummies or something. They're like, that's actually taken. It's like, all right, let's try it again, and it's like crash test morons.
I
That's
love the
us.
crash
That's
test
us.
dummies. Oh man. Speaking of Canada and crash test dummies, we worked with a guy named Greg Wells once, who's like, talk about talented Canadians, like musical genius. Like this guy can run circles around anybody on any instrument. He said he used to work with the crash test dummies back in Canada, and he always said that their family would call and be like, "Hey, how's the taping going?" And I was like, "Yes, that's the most Canadian shit I've ever heard. How's
Yeah.
the taping going?"
Yeah, it's just there's so many Canadian references that you hear in the States. Like now, either make like mocking us or just more or less like, oh, it's like we're not really mocking you. We just think it's really polite. And I'm like, that's fair. But I think it's like it's I feel like Jim Carrey is the embodiment of Canada in the sense of like when you see his stand up or you see how he presents himself, it's almost like it's not even like him anymore. It's almost like it's not even Jim just being Jim. It's almost like, guys, I got to represent Canada here as well. And I feel like with Mike Myers, it's the same thing. Maybe all Canadians, like Martin
Oh.
Short and a whole bunch. It's like when they do interviews, it's like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm like, you didn't even cut him off. He was done the
Right,
question.
they
Like,
can't just be themselves. They have to like
yeah,
represent like an
yeah,
entire group of people. Yeah,
yeah.
that's got to be daunting, man.
Yeah, I feel like as a Newfoundlander, I have to be very friendly and just very polite, but also have a few customizations of like my dialogue or how I say things, and I'm golden. The moment that I
Right.
ever don't or I'm not friendly, there's gonna be like you'll hear someone in the background like knock on the door. And be like, oh fuck! It's like I wasn't friendly. It's like that's strike one, Tobin.
Yeah.
I'm like, how many strikes do I got left? It's like, well, you're in Newfoundland. We don't really consider you a part of Canada. You might have 50. And I'd be like, okay, I'm good. I'm still got a lifetime left.
That's a lot of strikes.
Yeah, yeah. You like waste your last strike on like your 90th birthday where someone's just like, I bought you a cake.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. And you're like,
Like
I hate you. And it's
I've been
like,
waiting my whole life to be a bitter asshole,
yeah,
and
yeah,
now's my chance.
yeah. Because what are they gonna do? You're like 80 or 90 years old. It's like, dude, he's been here. He's done that. Just let him have his moment. And he's almost dead anyway. Let him be.
Yeah.
uh no, I think that's interesting. I want to ask you too, because when you were talking about now you being also involved in the drums, like don't sell yourself short because I feel like there's a lot of credit in terms of you, I think, produced, edited, mastered your first ever like kind of demo and got that sent off. And then it went from there. But the most interesting story I like about that is like, it's a go-getting world, even in the 90s. But I
Yeah.
like how like
Even
today's
more
world,
so, I feel.
yeah. Well, you have
Like,
TikTok and Instagram now and a whole bunch of social media where literally like in the case of a Shawn Mendes or a Bieber, you upload things and get it in the right views. Where back then,
yeah,
I
it's
feel like it's harder back then.
well, it's certainly harder to get a wide audience back
Yeah.
then, but I suppose the amount of work is probably similar because I know a lot of artists. I work with a lot of new artists from like a songwriting production standpoint, and they're always like struggling trying to figure out how to get traction on things like TikTok and stuff. And sometimes it has to do with their music. Sometimes it has nothing to do with their music, but it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I would not survive as an artist, as a 40-year-old man nowadays. But I put in the work in different ways, I suppose, because yeah, we recorded our own music and it didn't stop there. We then had to figure out how to get it onto some sort of format. So you have to burn the CDs, you have to design the artwork, you have to go to Kinko's, I guess FedEx office now. It used to be called Kinko's back in the 1900s. And we would print out all the inserts. We would, use their paper slicer and, make all the inserts and stuff all the CDs. And then we would have to make flyers for shows and go staple up flyers for shows. So it's the same kind of promotion. It's just on a much more localized scale, I suppose. It's an equal amount of work. Like I remember skipping school and missing work and doing, just just focusing on promoting a show. And what that used to
Yeah.
mean was like go hand out flyers and like staple shit to telephone poles.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's interesting because I actually the reason I brought this point up is because like I've interned in terms of like I have a communications degree. I wanted to be in journalism when I was younger, but when I
Oh,
went to
cool.
school, when I went to school and they were told me like, okay, well, you got accepted for film studies. I was like, all right, film studies isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. So I wanted
Right.
to transfer over into journalism, but they were like, what if we put you in the similar courses as journalism students, and then if you get good grades, you can next year maybe make the jump for journalism. I'm glad in
That's
the
cool. They
catch
were working with you on it.
yeah, but I'm glad in the catch 22 I didn't do journalism because I got to know these kids through or yeah, know them through the different courses. And
Hmm.
I listen, I'm all for getting an education, but I'm also for like, hey, I want to have a social life. So
Yeah.
I would go after class and be like, hey, do you want to like, hey Luke, do you want to hang out or what? And they're like, no, man, I got to keep up with the news. I got to do things for news. Like, and I was like, all right. Meanwhile, I'm out
It's a
playing
lifestyle.
yeah, like I'm out playing hockey with neighbor kids, and I'm like feeling like I'm Sidney Crosby here with neighbor kids. And then I look back now, like 5 or 6 years later, and I'm like, I like those memories more than being crammed into a school trying to like just get my grades up. And then even if you did get your
Sure.
grades up, it was still like if a kid was involved in newspaper, TV, blah, 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 and got 75 compared to the kid that had no extracurricular activities but an 80, they kept the kid with a 75. And I was like, I understand that, but that's a lot of mental psyche on me. So I'm like, I'm just going to
Yeah.
go with communications because it was more broad. And
Right.
doing internships, I was like, all right, now they're going to actually let me be involved at like a newsroom.
Mhm.
No, it was more like stay in the back and for 6 months just don't talk to us. And I was like, that is fucked up. And then but when I read the research on yours where it was like literally an intern found your like blue disc, as I guess they call it now, or the demo, and
Mhm.
saved it from the trash, I'm like, all right, find that intern and be like, hey, you're not like solely responsible for the All American Rejects, but you got to have some credit, because I feel like today's world where
Totally.
someone was like, hey, you were about to throw this thing out in the trash, what do you want me to do with it? They'd be like, Brian, throw it in the trash, and if you talk to me or look at me one more time, you're done. And I'd be like, oh my god.
Well, fortunately, she was also related to. So if she
Okay.
was just an intern, they might not have listened to her. But she
Yeah.
was an intern, and she was related to the head of the distribution company over at Doghouse Records.
Yeah.
Fortunately, but yeah, I mean, it was pure luck, man. It was one of those demo CDs that we made at my house and made the insert at Kinko's and put in an unsolicited envelope. And because I was a fan of the Get Up Kids, I just looked at the back of their CD, copied the address for the label, and just mailed it.
Oh
And
wow.
I was in
Okay.
the yeah.
And yeah, I've like, I mean, at least you were thinking ahead of time. Like, I feel like there are people out there now that even with all the social media that they have, they're like, who do I send this to? Where do I go from here? Like, I know sometimes when you're trying to touch base with acts or like musicians, you're like, all right, like the communication side of me knows how to do it now. But if I was 20 odd, I'd be like, especially in today's world, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll just tweet at Nick or I'll like send him a message. He'll definitely respond and be like, maybe, but he probably
Well,
gets a lot of
people are
messages.
more reachable now, and I mean, I guess I suppose if you know who you're looking for,
Yeah.
you can find them on some sort of platform and message them. I mean, I find a lot of bands and artists that I work with now just from them reaching out to me on Instagram.
Oh wow. Okay.
Um, but back in the day, like you never knew who the suit was on the other end of that like
Yeah.
record label address. Like I had no idea who you were mailing it to.
So
Like it was just
some guy in a basement where it's like, ah, what is this?
yeah, or just some guy in a tower. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like I have no idea. Like there used to be such like a is like the man behind the curtain kind of vibe, and now it's like everything has a face, and every face has an Instagram account.
Yeah.
So
It's true. I feel like, to kind of go off your example there, I feel like when I was 20 years old, or maybe it was during the time of MySpace, so maybe a little bit before, I remember liking this UK band called Scouting for Girls. And so
okay,
I like MySpace them or whatever. There's definitely people like, that's not the correct terminology. I'm like, leave me alone. But uh, and they instantly wrote back, and I believe now at this time that was probably them because it's their MySpace. The same with like 10 Second Epic, a Canadian band up here, and then they responded. So I would take their emails and just put them up on my wall where it's like, oh my God, they responded. So cool. But I feel like in
oh,
today's world, some of those times it might be just their social media person. Like they might actually have a hired person that responds. So like
mm.
there's you thinking like, yes, he responded. It's like actually he didn't. His social media team did. And you're like, not as cool. But I
I
remember
feel like
trying to,
band
yeah,
accounts and maybe like bigger solo artists have the
yeah,
same kind of thing, but
yeah,
like if you reach out to some dude in a band, it's probably just him. Like
yeah,
there's no middleman there. But
yeah.
like some bands probably do have somebody either at the label or their management company like mediating all of that stuff. You're right.
Yeah. It's just I just think it's kind of cool because like now you have this whole career with social media side of things where you do have a social media manager. Like if I was like 15 now and probably trying to get in contact with like Ed Sheeran, I'd be like, all right, let's tweet him, let's Instagram him, blah, blah, blah. And then now, knowing
Right.
the more savvy side, I'm like, all right, who's his manager? Who's his publicist? All right,
Totally.
that's how we go about it now. But there's still that
I
side of me where
was
it's like, just respond, Ed.
I was just reminded of this time, like back in like middle school. My my buddy like sent off to the like fan club address in like the Green Day Dookie album or something, and like said it was his birthday or something, and he got back like a signed Green Day 8x10,
Wow.
and you don't know if they signed that. It was probably some intern that just
Yeah.
like, yeah, happy birthday.
Yeah. It's
But I guess, yeah, nothing, literally nothing has changed.
yeah.
It's all the same. It's just different mediums.
Yeah. I feel like it's my
Yeah.
friend told me one time when we were in university, he was like, there's like a 10-year rule where it's like everything that was popular 10 years ago comes back. And I kind of get that because when I'm on Instagram now, I remember when I was younger, I would be looking at things from like a yearbook from the 80s or early 90s. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Like you either like it or you dislike it, or you're like, oh man, look at the fads. I felt personally attacked the other day when I went on Instagram and someone was like, hey, I found my sister's yearbook from like the 2010s. And they had like a My Chemical Romance song playing in the background. And all the haircuts were like the emo haircuts. And I was like, I am
Yeah.
attacked. That wasn't my
Yeah.
haircut, but that is my crowd.
I have a similar theory. Mine's around 15 years. I feel like the nostalgia cycle is about 15 years, and then it comes back around 10 years after that. I feel like
Yeah.
it's like 15 and then 25 total.
Yeah.
And then 40. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it goes 15 10 15 10, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because there are people out on like Instagram that do like TikToks and they're like, why do these songs that we listen to today sound familiar? And then I'll go back and be like, oh, right, because I grew up on those songs. But then if you listen to the
Mhm.
songs in the 90s and they were demoing things, you were there going like, oh yeah, like Kanye's such a genius. Like I listened to like Good Life with him and T-Pain and I like love this beat. And only realized in the last 5 years that that beat is like Pretty Young Thing by Michael Jackson. And then I was like,
Oh, I
because
don't
I
know that one.
wasn't
I'll have to go
born,
check it
yeah,
out.
like I wasn't born in that time frame. So of course I'm
Yeah.
gonna think that. But it's like the same way today when kids are out there bopping along to Olivia Rodrigo, and then people are like, that's Paramore. And then it's like,
From 15 years ago.
yeah. So it's almost like I get that, I understand it. And I don't get mad at kids who are like, she is so great. Can you listen to the song? I'm like, that's actually a little bit of Paramore. They're like, who? I'm like, all right, education time. Let's see if I can get
Right.
you. Let's see if I can get you just as invested in Paramore. And if they are,
Right.
great. If
Totally.
not, I'm like, that's fine. That's totally your call. I want to ask you. Well, actually, I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'll ask you a question because I think the story
Okay.
kind of relates. Because we're kind of talking about the whole 15-year and going back in time. My first ever MP3 player I got, not an iPod, it was an MP3 player. So like
Was
literally
it a
the screen,
Zune?
yeah, like it was like, yeah, exactly. Like the little thing would come
Yeah.
across of the song title, and you're like literally looking
Mhm.
at it. Um, and of course, you were giving your computer diseases by downloading it off like LimeWire of songs, or like you download a song, and if it's a new release, you wouldn't get the song. You would get pretty much like, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. I'm like, what? Who? I don't understand. What is this video? Nom, I did not download this. I swear to God, I was only looking for an All American
Right.
Reject song. But I remember the first time I got an MP3 player at Christmas, I had like 3 songs, and my mom was like kind of concerned where she's like, you don't have any more songs on your MP3. I'm like, number 1, I didn't want to tell her that I didn't know how to work it. Number 2, I was like, I don't want to download any more stuff because my older brothers was like, do not. You get 3 songs. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I think it was like an Eminem, Welcome to Detroit City. Always good when you're a young person listening to that song. All American Rejects, I think it was Dirty Little Secrets, which I think
All
when I
right.
do the hit counter, that was the most played. And I think the third one
Nice.
was like just like maybe the Wilkinsons. It's like a Canadian band up here, like a country song. So
Okay.
I had 3 different kind of landscapes or genres.
Good variety. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the 3 that I remember. And I guess it's kind of related to what radio does today, where a radio song is a hit, they constantly play it. So in my
Mhm.
mind, I was like, I don't have to listen to the radio. These are my 3 go-to songs. I can listen to them whenever. And then when I hear it on like the radio at
That's
night,
awesome.
I'm like, oh my God, I know every word. And then they're like, yes, new song from All American Rejects. And can you believe it's only been out 3 weeks? And I'm just like, okay, for people who don't have MP3s, that's great. But for me, I'm just like, I'm done. I've heard
You're
it. I
done. Yeah,
know
you're
it.
spent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You never
yeah.
need to hear that one again.
Yeah. But I just thought it was an interesting story because it just goes to show you like how invested I was in this band where I know people
That's
like
awesome.
the swing song, and I feel like that's debatable for me because I like it, but I still think there are better songs than that. And I know that's kind of like the peak,
Agreed.
but man, Dirty Little
That
Secrets
was
to me,
that was our first one. That was the
yeah.
one that got us that was
It got
dug out
people's
of the
attention.
trash.
Yeah, it got people's
Yeah, yeah.
attention. But I like Dirty Little Secrets, and I mean, even to this day, I know that they got down. "Give You Hell" was like your most successful song to date, peaking at number 4 on like I think it's like the Hot Billboard 100 or whatever. Uh,
Mhm.
but like, I will always argue with people where it's like, yes, I'm not debating that they don't have better songs. They obviously do, but this is my go-to. If someone was like, "All right, name me an All American Rejects song," I'd be like, "Dirty Little Secrets." Boom, done. And then there'll be like 5 like people like, "How did you not think of Move Along or this?" I'm like, "Listen, still impactful. This is just where my brain goes because I think of me being the MP3 kid running around the
Yep.
block going like, this is my jam. This is the happiest I'm ever
Yeah.
going to have in my life." No.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, thanks,
uh,
man.
but I want to ask you, like, do you get that sometimes with people when, like, if they walk up to you or they see you in a concert and they're like, "All right, we like this song," but they give you like one that you didn't randomly know. Like, you probably think, okay, these are like my top 3 or 4 songs of All American Rejects, and then they toss out a random one. You're like, really? That's your go-to?
Well, it's always a bummer when they're like, "This is," like, they say, their favorite one, and it's one that, like, we never play, and I'm like, well, you're not gonna hear that one tonight."
Yeah. I feel like there's like I bring it up because there was an interview I think with I'm just trying to remember his name from Fall Out Boy. I think it was like it's not was it Pete? Maybe it was Pete. I'm not sure
That's a
exactly.
person
Or
in
maybe it
Fall
was
Out Boy, yeah.
Pat. But it was like they were telling him one time of they were doing a concert in Chicago and one person walked up to them and was like, "Yeah, it was a great concert. But I didn't like the fact you didn't play the song and it just kind of kills your whole buzz." But now it was Mark
Yeah.
Hoppus interviewing him and then he kind of made the joke where it's like, "So now you know how I felt when you did it to me when we were playing Blink-182 and you walked up to me saying, 'Hey, I loved your concert, but you didn't play the song.'" And he just kind of laughed at
Oh,
it and it was like,
funny.
he's like, "Totally." But I love that encounter where it was like, you don't even know sometimes your fans actually become artists themselves. And then
Mhm.
one day you cross paths. But I just brought it up because I think it would be interesting if a fan came up to you and be like, "Yeah, well, like Dirty Little Secrets is overrated." And then like 5 years later, it's like you're managing them, and then it's like, "Yeah, I just
Right,
want to
right.
say I'm sorry that it was totally a cool song at the time. I was just a bummer."
I would not remember that
Yeah.
encounter 5 years
Oh,
later.
well,
My
good.
memory is not what it used to be. I would remember an encounter from 20 years ago
Yeah.
just because, like, I was young and those were
Yeah.
when all my wrinkles were being made up in my brain. But yeah, there's no more room up there. If that happened 5 years ago, I would not remember.
Yeah. Now, if someone came by to you tomorrow on like Instagram or Twitter and said something, and then the next day they show up at your door to like be a part of like a managing team or something, you're like, "All right, you look familiar. Why do you look familiar?" Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
Uh,
that that yeah, that might ring a bell.
yeah. You just be like, "All right." You'd be like, I guess I can help you. I don't know how I feel. You might be like that bitter Canadian where you're like, "I don't know, man," but
Bitter Canadian. I love that.
yeah. I want to ask you though, like obviously you've had like a number of albums that are out, but tell me a little bit about like producing that first album and like the success of Swing Swing because I feel like now when people today, and I believe someone said this in an interview, I think it may be Beyonce, not like recently, but she said like we don't come out with albums anymore. People don't listen to a body of
Mm,
music. It's like release a single, you listen to it. It's like a drug where it's like you listen to it, you're like, all right, now more, more, more. It's like, do you know how
yep.
long that artist spent to just make this one? Now
Yeah.
you're like demanding more, but tell me a little bit about like how happy you were with the success and like just getting over the
Well,
hump essentially.
I mean, if you look at our discography and the dates that things were released, like the last decade or so, like has been a lot more sparse, and it's been things
Yeah.
like singles and EPs, just because that's how people consume music nowadays. The first 10 years of our career was putting out 4 albums,
Yeah.
and all of them we strive to make an experience to listen to, and we also, we had 4 unique experiences creating them. That was back when you would take a year to just write an album. And then for us, we would go in the studio. It would depend on who was producing it, and what the workflow was like. But like, our second record took 6 weeks to make. Our third record took 9 months. So
Wow.
you could spend, the better part of another year making the album. And after you've put 1 to 2 years into something, you you're kinda spent. So then you go on the road and you don't write at all. All you do is perform and try to sleep when you can.
Yeah.
And that's another year or 2. So I guess all that to say, like, that first record, making that first record was the beginning of that. Tyson and I got in our tour van, which was like a 1993 GMC something or other, like in terrible shape. It had already been on the road. We were weekend warriors playing bars for, a couple years before that. So this van was trashed, but it got us to New York City. Um, and just to kind of set the scene a little bit, we drove to New York City 2 months after 9/11 to make that first record. So like we didn't, we barely left Oklahoma, Texas area before, and we were driving to New York City after 9/11. We're like, oh my god, like this is insane. Like
Yeah.
we had no idea what we were in for. It ended up being a great experience. I mean, yes, we slept on the producer's floor. Yes, we ate hot dogs for most of our meals because it was cheap. Um, but every Sunday we got to go into the city and explore. I'd never been to New York before. It was great. Um, I would go to the Virgin Megastore in Times Square, which I think is like a Forever 21 now. It doesn't even exist. But
Oh,
I
that's
would
sad.
go. I
Yeah.
know. I would go and thumb through all the CDs, and like I would once a week I'd buy like a dozen CDs. That's where all my money went. That's why I was eating hot dogs. And I would just ride the subway with my Discman and just listen to music, and I was digging in like deep into like the like older U2 records and stuff like that, and like discovering the Smiths and that kind of shit. Um and then, Monday through Saturday we would go into the back room of a boxing gym and record an album. Like that's where the studio was. Like
Yeah.
a lot of times we had to wait if there was a fight or something that was really loud, or if there was like an audience there, like we would have to wait until they were done and then we could record. It was bizarre, but it was an experience. And when I think about that album, I think about that experience. Everybody has their own experience, whether it's discovering it by seeing the video, or maybe it's an album that they work out to, or that they run to, or drive, at night to. I don't know. Everybody has like a reference when they
Yeah.
think about a record. For me, it's the making of it. And the making of the first one, yeah, was bizarre and surreal and like trying in like a sustenance kind of way. But I mean, shit, we were 17 and 19. We didn't give a shit. Like, we just wanted to make a record. Like, now I'd be more concerned about, all right, where's the coffee? What are we eating tonight? Like
Yeah.
all the other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first, making that first record was an experience, and it was all about making the record. Second one too, it was just quicker. The second one was quicker because the producer had a great team, a great engineer. It was really streamlined. We got a lot done in a short amount of time. Third one was like I said, a 9-month experience. But
Yeah.
we, got it. We got a band house and we all lived there and we just lived and breathed the experience of making that album. Same with the fourth one. We all got a band house. And I think it was about that time that we all started to turn 30. We were like, yeah, like we're like we're like we're like four dudes in their 30s. We can't be like living in a glorified frat house anymore and doing this. So that might be why the another reason why the releases kind of shifted and became more like sparse and more
Yeah.
singles and like quick little bursts, not like this. Like, okay, I'm gonna put my entire life on hold and live in a frat house for a year and make this album
That's fair.
because
I feel no, no, no.
that's the only way we really know how to. Like,
Yeah.
it'd be an interesting experiment to do it any other way, really.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair because actually, so recently we had I think he's like the drummer of Walk Off the Earth on this like podcast,
Oh yeah,
and he mentioned like similar things of he's like when you're young and you're first starting off, everything is an adventure, everything's great, like
hmm
like oh yeah, it's like when we come up with tour dates, yeah, we can go to like this place for like 3 months at a time, but then it's like when you
right,
get older, you get more responsibilities, so you have kids, it's almost like let's select a few dates here, let's see how we're doing and then like we can
right,
always come back and say, hey, here's some more dates that we're going, but it breaks in between. I understand that now, but like, I mean, as a kid, if I wanted to go watch like the All American Rejects or Backstreet Boys or whatever, and it's like not coming to Newfoundland, I'm just still like, so you're telling me I have to go to Toronto to go see one of my favorite bands? And it's like, yeah, because they're going to do a hit of Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. That's how this goes. And I'd be like, well,
yep,
while they're doing that, why don't they just do Halifax and Newfoundland? I'd be like, number one, they probably could do Halifax, New Brunswick. Newfoundland, you're on your own island, getting equipment,
yeah.
whatever. I'm like, all right, I can't wait to watch the All American Rejects when like they're 80. And then they're basically like, all right, we need the money now. And I'd be like, I will give you my money. You are finally coming. Because that's how
Yeah,
it
that's got to
works
be rough.
here.
I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up in Oklahoma, and it's landlocked. It's not an
Yeah.
island, I guess, but nobody ever came through Oklahoma. Like only recently did they get a professional sports team with an arena that accompanied that.
Okay.
So there really wasn't many places to just go see shows. I always had to go like down to Dallas or up to Kansas City, and that was like at least 5 hours away.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I kind of get it. Yours is probably way more extreme,
Yeah.
but yeah, growing up somewhere where nobody ever comes. If somebody tells me they've been to Oklahoma, they're like, I think I drove through there once. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably it.
It's just to me because like I obviously with a lot of people you have all these different genres that you get accustomed to or like, but it's like I will see one where it's like so and so has come to Newfoundland. I'm like, all right, let's see. Yeah, that's about right because he hasn't released something in like 3 or 4 years, and it's almost like, all right, he probably asked for a venue in like Toronto and Ottawa, and they're like, we're only going to give you this, but if you go to
Right.
Newfoundland, you're
Or
bound.
they've
So yeah,
already done like 6 tours on one
yeah,
album. They're gonna do another one. It's
yeah,
like, where haven't we gone?
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Topeka,
Yeah,
Kansas,
yeah.
Newfoundland. Like,
Yeah. Someone's just like the plane rides are going to be hell, but the fan bases are going to love you because you've never been there. And it's like, all right,
right.
sold.
Those tours are actually some of the most fun. Like the cities that seem random, like Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or like
Yeah.
fucking Biloxi, Mississippi. Sometimes those are the best shows because people aren't used to having options. Like so, when something comes through, it's like, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna go to that, and I'm gonna have a lot of fucking fun.
Yeah.
And it's great for the artist and the band too.
I want to ask you too, because I know like again, we're gonna go like all over the place. So it's not even like in chronological order, but like
All good.
if I have it here in my notes, I know that they're having like this thing in October, an October kind of fest,
Mhm.
when we were young fest. Now,
Yeah,
to me, I'm not one to get like easily offended or like what's the word like triggered. But reading that title when we were young and then seeing the bands, I'm like, are you saying that
that's funny.
me as 30 that I am now considered old because I don't feel old and these bands I don't even think are that old like Paramore, Avril Lavigne, All American Rejects, like I get it. You mentioned that to like a 17-year-old today, they're like, yeah, I know who Avril Lavigne is because she has songs out or whatever. I've heard of
Right.
Paramore because of Olivia Rodrigo, but I'm looking at these and I'm like, I don't consider that old. Like, rename the
A-
festival.
age is a construct, man. It's I think as time goes on, like I just turned 40 and I feel like 40 is the new 30. And when I turned 30,
So 30 must be
looking
the new
back on
20. No, no.
exactly, like I was still fucking up and making mistakes at 30. Like it is the new 20.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, like I guess I didn't think about that because I'm like, okay, I mean, in theory, no, I'm
Yeah.
not young anymore. So yeah, when we were young, I get
Yeah.
it. Like I
Yeah.
didn't think twice about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I can see why you were triggered. That's
Oh
funny.
no, no, like I get it for like the like if even if they called it like the nostalgia tour or something, I'd be like, oh right, because that's what like people in their 30s and late 20s are kind of like, oh, it's like yesterday I was listening to the I Heart 90s radio or I 2000s and I heard this band and that would bring back the nostalgia. I'm like, that makes sense to call it that. But when you're like when we were young, I'm
Yeah.
like, hold on a second. It's like when did what age like what age gap do you consider me old? But I was looking at it, and this is where I kind of come up with like the whole tour aspect where they give you, I think it's like 2 nights, or I think it's like 2 nights or 2 weekends in between when they're
hmm
doing this, but it's all in Vegas. And I'm like, uh, hello. Like, can you, I understand that we're all in this case, they all have their own plans and it's going to be hard to accommodate everybody, but like, couldn't you at least phone Toronto and say, hey, Toronto? And I would have been like, all right, I understand. I'd still go back to like the 10-year-old or the 15-year-old me and be like, plane ticket to Toronto. But at least this one would be worth it because I'm seeing a number of different bands.
I don't know. I don't know what the thinking is with that. I don't know
Yeah.
much about the
Yeah.
festival. I just know the lineup is insane, and I found out about the lineup the same day that everybody else did, which
Oh,
is kind of
wow.
funny.
Okay.
I mean, I knew I was playing it, but I did not know
Okay.
all
It'd
the
be
other
funny if
bands
you
that were
didn't
going
know
to
you
be
were
on it.
playing it. If you just be like, here's the
Yeah, right,
lineup, and you'd be like, I'm there, but no one told me.
right. I'm sure that's happened before,
Yeah.
but no, I knew about this one. I just wasn't aware of the lineup, and yeah, I don't know what the thinking is with Vegas, but Vegas in October is probably kind of nice. Like it's probably
Yeah.
cooling off a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of people are flying in for that festival, so it should be fun. And we're doing a bunch of shows leading up to it. Not like a proper tour or anything,
Yeah.
but everything kind of culminates at that festival in October. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. See, Nick, you just wheeled yourself in a really bad situation because I'm gonna be like, you're gonna do a few tour or a few dates before you go to do this festival.
I don't
Newfoundland.
think anybody. I don't. Well, hey, you know what? It's a
Yes.
two-way street, man. Canada hasn't called me,
All right,
so
that's fair. I will call Canada. I won't call Trudeau. I will just call
tell
Canada. I'll look it up and
just
see who.
tell
Yeah,
Canada,
yeah,
tell Jim Carrey to call me.
yeah. Man, if I could get Jim Carrey, I'd phone Jim and be like, Jim, I've got a number of questions. My first one is, can you get All American Rejects in Canada? Be like, really? That's your first question ever? Not like, how
That's
did the Grinch costume work? I'd be like, no, that was number two. Like, number two on my list
you're
was
gonna
like,
blow
how
your.
much green fur did you have stuffed in your mouth while filming that? And he'd be like, that wasn't your
Did
first
you
one?
know? Did you know that underwent the same kind of therapy that like torture victims, like prisoners of war, went through, just because of how long he had to sit to get that makeup on.
Oh, wow.
It was like 14 hours or something just to get the make like something insane. Don't quote me on it. I don't know
No,
how
no, no.
many
Like
hours. A lot
I've
of fucking hours.
definitely, I've definitely seen clips, and I like that sometimes social media brings this up, where it's like you see random clips of things where you never thought in your life, and then
hmm
you're like, okay, cool. But like, yeah, I've seen clips, and I listen. That's a committed actor right there. But if someone came to
Yeah.
me and I'm already Jim Carrey at its peak, I've done films, I'm doing great. I would be like, I'd be like, no, can we find something else to do? But that he was probably
Yeah.
super committed, and I'm like, good, because if they asked Brian Tobin, the AKA actor, if I was that famous, I'd be like, can I just play like someone in the background, like like
Yeah.
just like
Can you just like paint it on like
yeah
in post? Like I don't need to wear the
yeah.
makeup.
I wonder like if he's looking at like the Grinch movies now where it's like I think like there's other like cartoon and animated ones that have come out since.
hmm
I wonder if he's like furious now where it's like, why couldn't you just do that for me? I could have just been the voiceover. This would have been so much simpler. But I would have been
Yeah,
like,
but looking
yeah,
looking at the plethora of Grinch movies, I mean, his is clearly the best. Like, I
oh
think we
yeah,
can all agree on that. Yeah.
hands down. I
Mhm.
know I have like nieces and nephews that like the cartoon one from way back when, and then there's ones that like I guess it's like the 2019 or 2020 version, whatever one that came out with. But I'm like, if it's not Jim Carrey, it's no. I don't
Oh,
care.
yeah.
CBC could be like, we're gonna show you the Grinch before Christmas, and I'm like, is it the Jim Carrey version? They'd be like, no. I'd be like, all right, back to playing NHL. If it's the Jim Carrey version, I'd be like, all right, NHL, you take a hold. Madden, you take a
Right.
hold. I am 30,
Yep.
but I'm still going to be committed to watch this.
Goddamn right. Yeah,
Yeah,
every
yeah.
year.
I want to ask as well, like, it's interesting to me because, there are bands, they have their peak, they kind of go away for a bit, then they come back. Like, I will say this, and I feel like it's not a dig at you or a dig at the band, but, you know, when it was the song of Move Along, It Ends Tonight, that album, I think it's their second album.
Mhm.
I was
Yep.
really, really invested in that to the point where I'm not sure if Facebook was around. It might have been MSN, but MSN had this cool thing where you could change the background of your chat and like it was all time
Okay.
low. Or I had one where all time low, where a display picture because I love them, but I had the All American Rejects background from like the background chat.
Okay.
And my friend
Yeah,
was
yeah.
over and he's like, you have to pick one. I was like, why are you making me choose? I like both. And then it's just like one day he just changed it. And I was so rotted because he had deleted, like pissed off because he had deleted. And I was like,
Are you guys
dude,
still friends?
no, no.
Was
I
that the
feel like
turning point?
I don't even remember the name. It's one of those things where it's like it was a high school or it was probably like a junior high friend of a friend, and then they got invited over
Yeah.
because he had to come over, and it was like he just walked in, was like, this I don't like this, so I'm gonna change it. I'm like, no, you're not. And then I couldn't find it. But I bring it up because I've mentioned this to other bands as well, is there is a time period where you kind of grow out of a phase. Like I remember listening to
Mhm.
All American Rejects, Simple Plan, All Time Low, and like just being so heavily invested. And then all of a
Oh, yeah.
sudden you kind of get a little bit older. And like, yes, those are your memories. You will go back and listen to it, but you shift. But then when it came out with
Mhm.
Give Me Hell, or yeah, I was listening to that one and I seen it on the Much Music countdown up here, and I was like, all right, I'm invested again. I'm back. But at the same point, I'm just like, okay, and then what? Because it was just like, all right, they're still coming out with music, but I don't see it as much. Like, did that kind of frustrate
Right.
you in a way where it was like, all right, we've got these
Of
songs, and now
course,
that
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, because we put a lot into the follow-up album after the record that had Gives You Hell on it, a record called Kids in the Street. We put a lot into that, like, probably the most just because at that point, like I said, we were all turning 30, yet we relocated ourselves and lived in a band house and,
yeah,
in Santa Monica, California, and lived and breathed making that record. So when it doesn't perform up to your expectations or you feel like people aren't showing up the same way that you did, yeah, it's frustrating and it's disheartening, especially after putting 2 years of work into it. But I think it also kind of coincided with us getting to the point where we'd been doing it for 15 years. We were getting a little older. We didn't all have just this one common goal anymore. We had some other interests. Tyson's been acting. I've been working with a lot of other artists and being in the studio more because that's always been my favorite part of the process. And just diversifying. So I think that was necessary. I think if it kept on going up and up and up and up and up,
yeah,
I don't know where we'd be now. I don't know. Maybe we'd be worse off. I'm not sure.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't. I'm not mad about it now. I was mad
No,
about
that
it then, but I'm
no.
not really mad about it now.
No, I mean that's fair because I just bring it up just because like as I wasn't like to try to like make it sound sour or pinpoint anything. It's just like sometimes you see bands that have like a one hit wonder or they got successful, and I just love having the conversation with them if you have the time. And then because they all have a different approach to it. Like I remember reading, and I think there's a video clip of Edmund McCain. I think it's Edmund McCain or that has
Edwin
the song.
McCain, yeah.
Yeah, and like
Is he
I
the?
love.
Is he the?
Oh, go ahead.
Uh, is he Albee? Is that him?
Yes. And that's
Okay.
a
Yeah.
go-to 90s song. Like, I will argue
Oh
that if
yeah.
you're gonna come up with, like, a 90s hit list of, like, I like, if you were to go back in a time machine, you gotta, like, this is how you can relate to the 90s. Here's songs that you listen
He
to.
still plays here in Nashville, I think.
Yeah,
I see his name come up every now and then.
but
He's still cranking them out.
But I love that when someone had asked him about it, he was like, "Why would I be mad?" Like, "Yeah, it's a one-hit wonder or whatever." But he's like, "Do you know how much that song made me famous? Do you know how much that paid for me?" And I'm like, I like that he's not, like, bitter about it. He's more or less like, "Dude, I
Sure.
do you know how many times I've written songs or something?" And they're like, "Nothing. I've got one out of so many songs. Like, that's great for me." But then there's other artists where it's like, the label fucked it up for me and I don't like it and I'm sick and tired of hearing myself as a one-hit wonder. I'm like, I get that too, but there's a part of me where it's like, if I'm going to talk to someone, I think I like the Edwin approach where
Totally.
it's like he's happy and like fans are still like, it feels like the approach where if I walked up to him tomorrow and be like, I really love that song, he'd be like, well, thank you. Where if I went up to the artist who did not like the one hit wonder, I'd be like, really love that song. Oh, go bite a leg or go fuck yourself. I'd be like, I bought it.
What is the first thing you said? Buy a leg?
Go bite a leg. I don't know. It just came out of
Go
my
bite
mouth.
a
I'm just
leg.
like, that would be me because I'm so furious where
Is that a
I don't
Canadian
know my
thing?
words. I'd be like, go
Okay.
bite a leg.
Gotcha.
And then be like, do you mean go bite yourself or fuck off or something? And I'd be like, no, go bite a leg. And they'd be like, did he mean break a leg? I'd be like, no, I'm so furious and flustered at you that these are
Right.
words. Yeah. But I like that
Well,
approach. So yeah.
that's a good point. I mean, you know, even though we've had some albums that are less successful, we were afforded to be able to make them because of the
Yeah.
ones that came before that were successful. So that's a really nice way to look at it. I like that.
Yeah, it's a good way, but I wanna ask you too in that kind of, mindset too, like, when you have fans that come up to you and, like, tell you, like, their favorite song or favorite album, like, do they then follow it up with, like, "So, like, what are you guys doing now?" Does that, like, piss you off then where it's just like, "Dude, like, I'm okay. Like, don't make it sound like it's so sad, like, oh, what are you guys doing now?" It's like, "Actually, we're
Right.
doing really well." Like,
I mean, of course, after you get to be successful at something, you want to continue either the success or being noticed for the success. I never really cared about that. I cared about that in my 20s, like
yeah,
when everybody cares about attention. Um, so of course you want to be like, I want to be like, I mean, yeah, I'm still working on music. Like that's my
yeah,
job. Like
yeah.
I'm not working at McDonald's. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
it's not like we're seeing like a "Where Are They Now" feature where it's like, "Nick Wheeler, whatever happened to Nick Wheeler?" It's like and then
right.
they drive into like, I don't know, like a McDonald's or a Tim Hortons here in Canada, and it's like, how did they go from Oklahoma to Canada? It's like, "This is the only place that hired me now." I'm just like, "Oh,
Right.
that's tragedy." Like,
But I will say, if I did have to, you know, I don't have a college education. I barely have a high school education. So getting a real job would be very difficult for me. I will say that.
yeah. When you look back at the All American Rejects, just your career in general, like what are some real highlights for you in terms of just, I don't know, they could be personal, they could be band related, they could be a little bit of like, hey, neither or. I actually got this thing going on the go, and this is what my highlight is.
I mean, we've been so fortunate, and there's been so many. A lot of them feel like it wasn't real, or it feels like it was somebody else's life. And I'm like we got to do this thing called the Rock Honors, where we played a Def Leppard song for Def Leppard, and Queen was there, Kiss was there. It was insane. Like we had no business being there, but we got to be there, and that was certainly a surreal experience. And I look back on that, and I'm like, wait, did that happen, or was that like some weird dream? Um, Now, just doing what I do and just being more like studio focused, highlights for me was the people that we got to work with, on a professional level, when creating and making music. Those are the things that I reference the most now and just remember the most, and are just have the most like aha kind of like moments where things click. But I mean, we got to travel to some great places. We got to, I just see stuff I never thought I'd get to see. I don't know. That's one of those things where there's just so much. It's just mush in there.
Yeah.
And one day somebody will say something and jog a memory, and I'll have to like recount it, not to like brag or tell a story. It's like, oh, I need to say this so that I remember it and remember that it's real and that it actually happened. And maybe that will buy me 15 more years of memory out of
Yeah,
it.
that's fair. I want to ask because before we kind of wrap it up with other things here, like now you might not know this or whatever, but hold on, let me see if I can pull it up on my phone. But I think it was an interview that I believe Tyson did, and okay, here it is. I think I got it here. Um, he mentioned this. It was like without all the politics that come into play when signed to a major label, like the process of like, the label paying like 20, 40 stations to play music and whatnot. But I think it's interesting because that was a clip that I thought was interesting, or a little I guess a snippet that he said. But he also mentioned recently, like when someone asked him, do the All American Rejects, will they like play more music or create more music? And he was like, at this point, I don't think so. And I was like, all right. Like, I'm guessing you've had these discussions as a band, but I feel like there's fans that are probably out there like, how dare you, Tyson? Can you just give us a little bit of hope? But like, in terms of, I want to ask you with the record label side and that, like, when he's talking about the politics of that stuff, like, now maybe you don't have a response. That's totally fine. But like, did you find that when you were with the record label, like sometimes they would be telling you, "How about we release this song?" or "Can you keep grinding? We want more tunes."
As we got older, we kind of started to realize some of the politics and just some of the business that went behind it. When we first started, we were kids. It was
Yeah,
almost like we weren't aware or we didn't notice. It's kind of like, if you're a kid and your parents aren't like telling you that like one of them lost their job or something. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like they're like the record label's not going to tell us every bit of business and politics that's going on. They're just going to try to either guide us or just make the decision, on their own, whatever. But as we got older, yeah, and we also got a little more influence, I guess, as to what this next single should be or whatever. Uh, we weren't always right. Um, I remember we wanted to release "Move Along" first, but Jimmy Iovine was set on "It Has to Be Dirty Little Secret," and we thought "Move Along" was the better song, so why not release it first? But he had a game plan, and he was fucking right. Um, we wanted to release a song called "Wind Blows" after "Gives You Hell." It was a ballad. Like the label wanted to do something different, but at that point we had influence. We were like, "Nope, release the ballad." Terrible
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
Um, but then later you kind of start to I don't know. Like I said, there I don't anything having to do with like paying radio stations and like that. Like I wasn't aware of any of that
yeah,
going on. I've heard stories, but like yeah, the artist wouldn't be involved in that, and they wouldn't tell the artist if that was ever a
yeah,
thing. I mean, it took Dirty Little Secret 6 months to get traction at radio. They weren't paying off anybody for that. That's a
yeah,
long
yeah,
fucking time. That's
yeah. Well, I think it's
um,
interesting because like I didn't mean to cut you off, but when you were talking about how the artist wouldn't know that stuff, I think it was funny because they had like T-Pain on a radio station. Now it could have been recently, could have been a few years ago, but he was talking about like the world of TikTok and social media. And he's like, at one point, you would literally have to have so much money or so much bank because you would then have to go to the like radio stations and be like, all right, I've got a new song out. Here's money, push it to play. But now it's almost like someone can go on TikTok and like once that song becomes trending, then there's people that will phone radio stations if they still do that, but they'll be like, how come you
right,
guys don't play this song? And they're like, okay, now we're getting this song requested. We need to find a way to put this on. Or the song just becomes so trendy that the radio stations are like, well, we want them to listen to our radio station, so we might as well start playing this song.
right.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Things have to become like part of the zeitgeist, or they have to become a meme first.
Yeah.
Almost like, and yeah, like so many like in order to, whether it's getting radio play or getting a record label to notice you, all they want to know your social stats, and they want to know, how many followers you have on TikTok, etc. Like, man, I can't
It's
imagine being an artist right now.
have you been on Instagram or socials recently where some things that are trendy, you're kind of like, how is that trendy? And then a really good interview
Right.
where like, a conversation just gets lost. I've gone on YouTube and like gone down to the rabbit hole and I'm like, man, this is a really good clip. But how come it has less views than this frog that sounds like he's barking? And I'm like, that does not make sense. I feel bad for like the act that comes
Yeah.
on, and it's like,
same with music. There's some really great songs that nobody ever gets to hear, and there's some crap that we hear way too much. But
yeah,
it's the way it goes. You just got to keep doing your thing and just make yourself happy.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Nick Wheeler for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening and good night.